So Balji, can we rely on you to educate us uh, about what is actually happening in Straits Times? You have been you are a veteran of the Straits Times. You have spent so many years of your life in business times and also in many of the spin-off versions of Straits Times publications. So Balji,
Thank
floor is
you.
yours.
Thank you, King Soon. Let me first clarify that my stint in the Straits Times was very brief. I think maybe 3 years, and that was more because of an accident than anything else. I was in the New Nation, and before that I was in the Malay Mail, and New Nation had to be closed down. And we in New Nation had no choice but to go to the Straits Times. So it was more a forced entry into the Straits Times. And I must also say that was my most difficult period in my journalism career because I had always worked in underdog publications, and to go into a kind of a very straight-jacketed newspaper with a straight-jacketed newsroom structure was very, very difficult for me to adjust. So when the opportunity came and when the new paper was being started in 1988, I jumped at the possibility of joining new paper, and I've remained an underdog for the rest of my life. So I would be, I can still talk about the Straits Times, but I can talk about the Straits Times because even when I was in a new paper, I had a kind of an observer's point of view to the Straits Times, because there were many, many meetings that I attended, which was chaired by the editor-in-chief, which involved the Straits Times. And I would like to say that the first point, or maybe the main point, is that, and I've said this before, that we had editors, who, I won't say who were brave, but who were prepared to kind of tell the government, even Lee Kuan Yew, that, hey, this thing I think is not good. If you force us to do this, this is not good for the government, and this is not good for the newspaper, for the media. I mean, the examples have been publicized especially in Chong Ip Seng's book, and about the opposition politician Cham Si Tong and versus Ma Bao Tan. So I don't want to go into those details because they are all published material. But and I was a listener, if you can call it, when the calls were coming from James Fu, and Peter Lim, who was the editor-in-chief, was in his with great patience,
The way James Fu was Lee Kuan Yew's press secretary, right?
Yeah, that's right. James Fu was Lee Kuan Yew's press secretary.
Therefore, he was the direct link to the newspaper.
He was the direct link. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And he and there were a number of conversations that went on. So Peter will say something to the effect that this is not good because the readers will wonder where we got this instruction from. So it's not good for the media, and of course it's not good for the government. Then a couple of minutes later, he will call back. Obviously, he must have checked with Mr. Lee. Will come back, and Peter Lim will put up another argument maybe. And so it went on for a while, But Peter never gave in. He believed in that principle that this is not going to be good for the media and this is not going to be good for the government. And in the end, he followed his heart and his mind, I'm sure, that he will not publish the full results of Chamsi Tong and Mabautan, who are fighting the Potong Pasir election. Mabautan was fighting the Potong Pasir election for the first time. What Lee Kuan Yew wanted was to publish the full results. Peter said, we will not publish the full results, but we will publish what the PM said at the Fullerton rally, which is the top line results. So, of course, to cut a long story short, Peter lost his job, and Peter has never spoken publicly about it. I have never asked him why he quit. He quit, but he gave a one-line answer in Margaret Turnbull's book on the Straits Times, and that one-line answer was, a member of the board told me that your deputy is ready to take over. At that time, Peter was 53 years old. So for Peter to retire at 53 years old is a bit, kind of beyond imagination. So, and there are many other cases, of editors of that time. I won't say it's a pushback, but trying to explain to the powers that be that this is not the way to do things. Sometimes they have given in. No, I'm not saying that they were successful all the time. Sometimes they succeeded, but that success turned out to be, what shall I say, always it is the editor's blood that is on the floor, And another editor that I have a lot of respect for is Leslie Fong, who was the editor of the Straits Times. And he used to write columns, I think it was called Thinking Aloud. And Lee Kuan Yew was very upset with the columns. And he told Lim Kim San, who was the executive chairman at that time, to sack Leslie Fong. I know this because I was at one meeting where Leslie actually mentioned this. But Lim Kim San decided to do a deal with Lee Kuan Yew and to stop Leslie from writing columns, but he will continue to be in the Straits Times. But Leslie paid a price because he didn't become the editor-in-chief, which is the normal route. Editor of Straits Times becomes the editor-in-chief, and he was moved to hit the China desk. So people, the editors who are now in the Straits Times, for example, see all these things, right? And maybe, I can't read their minds, but they said, it's no point fighting the government because in the end, I'm going to lose my job and good salaries. Do I want to lose my salaries? Which is what Ngiam Tong Dao said many years ago about ministers' salaries, that one of the reasons why they will not do anything against or speak against anything against the government because their wives will be upset, that they will lose their jobs and they may not have the high salaries that their husbands get. So the point I'm trying to raise here is, I think what is it that made the editors of that time, I'm talking about the editors of the 80s and 90s, what made them that kind of people, that we don't see now, and also that you would see that the kind of journalism that was practiced then is very different from the journalism that is practiced now. By that I mean that you would see stories which not so much criticize the government, but the stories written in such a way that when you read, say, oh, there's something, here, Today you can't even find that. I remember a couple of years ago, I was invited for breakfast with quite a senior minister, I was very reluctant to go, so I gave some excuse. Then second time, the PR minder came back and said, can we schedule a meeting on this time? I lied and I said I got a doctor's appointment because I just didn't want to, I was already out of journalism, so why should I want to meet the minister? And finally, the minder came back and said, you give a date and time, the minister will be there. And I had no escape route. So I went for the breakfast meeting. It was a good meeting, because I told myself, what am I going to tell of value to this minister? So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to tell, and which is what I told him. I said, I didn't talk about government control, but I did tell him that please tell all the ministers to stop making speeches, because firstly, their speeches are so dull. Two, they are very repetitive. The points are being repeated. And thirdly, the language, is something that I don't think fits into a modern society, the kind of words that they use, And interestingly, that minister was just listening. Yeah? He did not put up any defense. Maybe he asked a couple of questions, but they were not questions to push me back. He asked for elaborations, which I gave. And actually, I came out of that meeting quite hopeful. That was a few years ago, but obviously things have not changed. So maybe this minister that I met had tried to do something, and maybe the cabinet didn't approve, or somebody else didn't approve. So and this is the question that I wrestle with. I don't have an answer. What made the editors, Peter Lim and to a certain extent Chong Ip Sing and Leslie Fong, put up a strong case to sometimes not publish or not agree to a request by government? What was it? I don't know. I don't have an answer. Maybe some of you or some people who worked in SPH may have an answer, but I don't have an answer. And of course, not to forget Han Fo Kwang, who was the editor of the Straits Times. And the 2011 elections, the coverage in the Straits Times was, to my view, one of the fairest in recent times. And what happened to him? Soon after, he was removed, and Warren Fernandez was brought in as the editor. Then he became, as the editor, then he became editor-in-chief. First time that in SPH in a long while that we have both the editor-in-chief and the editor in being one man, or one person. So, and people down the line in SPH or in other organizations see this, right? They see this and say, why do I want to affect my future? So, so I go back to the basic question that we had. Don't go away with the impression that we never had editors who were prepared to push back, and we had. I don't think we have any now. And of course, there are some occasionally columnists who write some things which kind of forces me to, hey, what is this? Is there something? Is there a wind of change, that is blowing through the Straits Times, or what? So coming to the original question about liberalization of media, right? I just want to add a certain kind of a historical perspective. 2000, the government actually used the word liberalization and said, we want to liberalize media. And that's when, of course, and their definition of liberalization is give SPH licenses to start 2 TV channels give MediaCorp a license to start today, but the only product that is still surviving is the Today online. It was a newspaper, but it's now online, and it was a drastic failure. And how many people's lives were affected as a result of this? How much of money was thrown down the drain? So a good friend of mine told me many years ago, it's not liberalization, it's proliferation. Yeah, we have more TV channels, maybe an extra newspaper, but this is not media liberalization. And I just want to add one more point before I stop, and that is when I was involved in the startup of Today, in starting Today, and when we were planning what should be the concept of the Today newspaper, we finally came up with the idea of, for want of a better phrase, analytical reporting. And one of the young reporters, is a very bright girl, who then asked at that meeting, but won't the government get angry with us? Valid question, because the government never wanted analysis mixed with news. Government said, let's separate news and separate analysis in the analysis pages. But I felt that that was the only proposition, the USP that Today had. And I told her, this is more than 30 years ago, I told her that I somehow feel in my bones that Mr. Goh Chok Tong, who was the Prime Minister, will not interfere. And in the 3 years I was there, Goh Chok Tong never interfered. There were attempts by some ST editors to campaign with government and say, how come Today can do this kind of reporting? I had heard of them, heard of these comments being made, or representations being made to government, and I had gone and seen one of the ministers, and I told him, look, this is our approach, and I know that ST people have come to you, but we have to do this, And that minister told me, don't worry, I know the game that is being played. So I think it's quite sad, to see the kind of journalism that we have in the main media, and I'm so glad that we have an active social media. And when I mean social media, I'm not just talking about Facebook and people shooting from their hips, but I think there are more serious discussions going on. At least 2 groups or 2 people have already put out on online that they want to start some media outlet, some kind of media outlets, and asking for writers and those who are interested in supporting this. So I am, and of course, the other one that is also worth looking at is academia.sg, because they are using academics, and I've read some of the pieces. They are written in a way which is not normally written by academics, which is easier for an ordinary reader, to go through. So I am somewhat hopeful, and we will have to wait and see. I think I should end in that note of optimism.